My name is Robertson. I am 34 years old, and I am a mechanic in a quiet town called Bostonville. Every morning, I woke up to the smell of engine oil, dust, and hope. My workshop sat near the roadside, with a sound of passing bikes and chatter from a nearby market filled the air. Life wasn't fancy, but it was honest. I loved my wife, Unia, more than anything. When we first married, she said my hands smelled like hard work and her heart melted whenever I smiled. But lately, her eyes no longer carried that warmth. Her friends often came over, wearing fine dresses and gold bangles that glittered under sun. I could see how Unia looked at them, her laughter forced, her eyes darting between their designer handbags and my old work boots. That Friday night, she invited some of them for dinner. I sat quietly, eating the small portion of rice on my plate. One of her friends asked how much I earned. Before I could speak, Unia laughed. "Not enough to buy himself a new shirt," she said. They all chuckled. I smiled weakly, pretending it didn't sting, but something broke inside me that night. When the laughter died, I looked at her and said softly, "Unia, never mock the hands that build your tomorrow." She rolled her eyes. She didn't know that while she mocked my small salary, I had been building something quietly, patiently, for a whole year. The next morning, I left for work earlier than usual. I didn't tell Unia why. She barely noticed. Her phone buzzed with messages from her friends, and I could hear faint laughter as I closed the door. At my workshop, I fixed a client's old motorcycle, but my mind wasn't there. I went into the back room, a small shed I had turned into my secret space. Inside were scraps of metal wires and drawings taped to the wall. My idea looked messy on paper, but I could see it clearly in my mind. A small, affordable generator that could run on recycled oil and solar backup. I had been testing it for months, using my savings and long nights. The townspeople thought I worked late for extra money. Even Unia believed I was chasing more clients. She didn't know I was chasing a dream. Sometimes, an elderly man named Chick stopped by. He was a retired engineer who lived nearby. He'd bring me spare parts, teach me new things, and ask no questions. He saw something in me that my own wife no longer did. One night, while tightening a bolt, I whispered to myself, "One day they'll see." That evening, when I got home, Unia barely spoke. She only said, "You should earn more if you want people to respect you." I nodded and smiled, but deep down, I promised myself, soon, the whole town would see what I've been working on. As months passed, my secret project grew more real. Every piece of metal I welded felt like a promise to myself. Chick called it the light of Bostonville. I called it my redemption. I tested the small generator behind the workshop every night, covering it with an old tarp when anyone came by. It worked. Faintly at first, but every success pushed me further. Still, the rumors started. People said I was hiding something from my wife. Unia's friends whispered that maybe I was seeing another woman. I could see the doubt in Unia's eyes whenever I came home late. One night, she waited at the door and said coldly, "If you're seeing someone, just say it." I laughed softly. "I'm seeing my future," I replied, but she didn't believe me. That week, she stopped preparing my meals. When I asked why, she said, "You seem too busy for this home." The pain cut deep, yet I kept going. I spent the next few nights soldering parts until my fingers blistered. I barely slept. Chick would bring me food sometimes and tell me, "Patience, my boy, you're almost there." Then one evening, while I worked, the light flickered, and the generator came to life. The sound was smooth, steady, powerful. I fell to my knees and whispered, "Thank God, it works." I didn't know that joy was about to meet its biggest test. 2 weeks later, the rainy season came. The roads flooded, power went out, and the town sat in darkness. My workshop was the only place with light. People gathered outside, amazed. "How do you have power?" they asked. I smiled and said, "A little miracle." News spread fast. Within days, a small crowd came every evening to watch. Some called me a genius. Others said I was lucky. But Unia never came. She stayed home, embarrassed by the same man she once mocked. Then one night, She showed up. She stood outside, watching the glowing bulbs from my generator. "You did this?" she asked quietly. "Yes," I said, wiping sweat from my face. "With what little I had." She looked away. "It's impressive," she muttered, but her voice carried no warmth. A week later, a local journalist came by. He said he'd heard about the mechanic who created light from scraps. I told him I wasn't ready for attention yet. My design wasn't finished. That same night, Chick handed me an envelope. Inside was a card from an investor who wanted to meet me in Lagos. I stared at it, unsure. "Why me?" I asked. Chick smiled. "Because real talent doesn't hide forever." Unia didn't know it yet, but my journey was about to take me far beyond the walls of that workshop. I told Unia about the investor's interest. She didn't believe me at first. "Someone wants to fund your scrap generator?" She scoffed. "Yes," I said calmly. "He's serious." She shrugged. "You should focus on fixing cars. Dreams don't feed people." Her words stung, but I packed my tools anyway. Chick and I left early the next morning for Lagos. It was my first time traveling so far. The city lights, tall buildings, and endless cars felt like another world. At the investor's office, a young assistant led us to a man named Mr. Barrett, a soft-spoken entrepreneur. He studied my drawings, asked sharp questions, and smiled. "You built this alone?" "With Chick's help," I said proudly. He nodded slowly. "You have something rare, purpose." We spent hours discussing potential improvements, safety tests, and production. Before we left, he said, "Go back home. Finish your prototype. I'll send my team to test it next month." As we boarded the bus home, Chick grinned. "Your time is coming, my boy." When I reached home, Unia barely looked up from her phone. "How was your fantasy trip?" she asked. I smiled. "One day, Unia," I said softly, "you'll understand what I've been building." She didn't answer, but I could already feel the storm of change gathering on the horizon. Friday morning came too quickly. My heart raced as I buttoned my only clean shirt. The air outside felt thick with rain and tension. I carried the letter in my pocket, still unsure if it was real or some cruel joke. When I reached the new industrial center, the place buzzed with life. Cars lined the front gate. Cameramen carried tripods. People in suits walked briskly, holding files and microphones. I stood frozen, feeling like a stranger in my own story. A young woman approached and said, "Sir, you're Robertson, right? Your seat is ready." I nodded, my voice caught in my throat. She led me to the front row where a large banner read, "Presentation of a new invention, Eco Power Solutions." My blood ran cold. That was the name I had written on my stolen drawings. On stage stood a man in a gray suit, and beside him, Unia. She looked radiant, smiling proudly as flashes from cameras lit her face. The man spoke. "We are proud to introduce the future of clean energy, a locally designed generator, created by our company's newest partner, Mrs. Unia." The crowd clapped. My ears rang. I wanted to scream. My project, my dream, my year of sweat and sleepless nights. Stolen. Unia's eyes met mine for a moment. Then she looked away, pretending not to know me. The lights dimmed. The generator on stage began to hum. And I sat there, drowning in silence. The applause thundered. Cameras flashed. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I couldn't move. Unia smiled and waved as if she truly owned what was being shown. The generator glowed steadily. My design, my wiring, my markings. Everything. When the show ended, people surrounded her. Reporters asked questions. She laughed gracefully, saying, "I worked on this for months. I knew it would help our town." I walked out quietly before I lost control. The wind outside felt heavy and cold. My hands shook with anger, betrayal, and shame. At a corner, I saw Chick standing by a parked car, watching me. "You came," he said softly. "You knew?" I asked. He sighed. "I tried to warn you. When you were in Lagos, Unia came to the workshop. She took your files. I thought she only wanted to understand your work, not steal it." Tears stung my eyes. She took everything. Chick, my dream. He placed a hand on my shoulder. Not everything. The real power isn't in what she took, but in what you can still create. I shook my head. No one will believe me. He smiled faintly. Then show them, but not with anger, with proof. That night, I sat in darkness, staring at my hands, the same hands she had mocked, the same hands that built the light. I whispered, they will know, one day they will know. For days, I vanished from sight. People thought I had gone mad. I didn't eat much, didn't talk to anyone. The pain was too heavy to describe. Everywhere I went, I heard Unia's name. The radio praised her invention. The newspapers printed her photo beside the words, the woman who brought power back to Bostonville. It felt like a knife twisting deeper each day. But in my silence, I found something resolve. I still had my old notes, the backup sketches I'd kept hidden in a metal box under the shed floor. I dug them out one evening and spread them across my workbench. If they want to steal my work, I muttered, they'll have to chase my shadow too. I worked again, this time harder, sharper. I improved the generator, doubled its output, and changed the core structure. A week later, I received a message from Mr. Barrett himself. It read, I was surprised to see another company present your design. Come to Lagos. We need to talk. My heart raced. He knew. I packed my bag that night. Before leaving, I stood outside the house that once felt like home. The lights were off. Uni was gone, maybe enjoying her new life. I whispered to the empty air, you took my dream, Unia, but you didn't take my fire. When I arrived in Lagos, Mr. Barrett welcomed me with a firm handshake and kind eyes. Sit down, Robertson, he said. Tell me everything. I told him about the stolen files, the broken door, and Unia's sudden appearance at the presentation. He listened quietly, then sighed deeply. I suspected something. The team said her data looked too advanced for someone without technical training. He leaned forward. You have the original design? Yes, sir, I said, showing him my old sketches. He smiled. Good. Then we'll handle this properly. He introduced me to his legal team. They documented everything, took copies, and said they would contact the authorities. But that wasn't what mattered to me most. Mr. Barrett looked at me and said, forget revenge. I want you to finish your prototype, the real one. Under my company's support. We'll reveal it when it's ready. I felt tears rise. Thank you, sir. He placed a hand on my shoulder. You earned this, Robertson. Hard work never hides forever. That evening, I walked out of his office into the sunset, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. I whispered to myself. They laughed once. Now they will watch. And as the city lights flickered, I knew my new beginning had just started. For the next 3 months, I lived in Lagos, working day and night in Mr. Barrett's lab. Real engineers joined me, refining my design with better materials and software. I felt alive again. Every sound of the humming engine reminded me that pain could build purpose. Meanwhile, news began to spread that Unia's company was struggling. Her stolen generator had started malfunctioning. Customers complained it broke down after hours of use. Her investors demanded answers. One morning, I saw her face on the news, pale, nervous. The headline read, Eco-Power Scandal. Questions rise over authenticity of design. I turned off the TV and sighed. Truth has a long journey, but it always arrives. Weeks later, Mr. Barrett called me into his office. It's time, he said. We'll hold a public presentation. Your real one. The same hall, the same stage. Are you ready? My hands trembled. Yes, sir. He smiled. Good. We'll invite the press, investors, and even your wife. She deserves to see what patience built. The thought made my chest tighten. But deep down, I knew it was right. The light that was stolen would shine brighter this time, and no one would be able to hide from it. The morning of the presentation arrived with heavy clouds and restless winds. My heart thudded as I looked at my reflection in the mirror. The man staring back wasn't the same one who had walked out of that town humiliated and heartbroken. My eyes were sharper, my hands steadier. Mr. Barrett's driver picked me up early. As we drove to the same hall where my dream was stolen, I could already see banners fluttering outside. Eco power versus true power, the real innovation unveiled today. People were already gathering. Journalists set up their cameras, and I heard murmurs everywhere. Who is the real inventor? Will Unia show up? Inside, the stage lights were brighter than before. I sat quietly at the back as the event began. Mr. Barrett introduced me only as a young engineer whose work will change lives. Then the doors opened. Unia walked in. Her once glowing face was pale, strained with shame. Reporters rushed toward her. I could hear flashes clicking, questions flying. She avoided my gaze, clutching her purse tightly like it was her last shield. The host's voice echoed, "Ladies and gentlemen, today we reveal the truth behind the power that lights our homes." My breath caught. The time had come. When my name was called, silence filled the hall. Robertson, the host, said, "The real creator of the Eco Power Generator, and now, the founder of True Power Innovations." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I stood slowly, walking to the stage under the flood of lights. I could feel hundreds of eyes watching me, curious, regretful, stunned. Unia's lips parted slightly. I could see tears building in her eyes, though pride kept her still. I took the microphone, my voice trembling at first, but growing stronger. I worked on this project for a year in my small shed, without funding, without luxury, just faith. But one night, everything I built was stolen. My sketches, my code, my heart. A hush swept through the hall. But truth, I continued, does not need to shout. It just waits for light. I stepped aside, revealing my improved generator. The engineers powered it up, a steady hum, followed by a bright, clean surge of light flooding the hall. The crowd erupted in applause. Some stood, some cried. I looked at Unia. She was trembling now, her mascara streaking. And for the first time, I didn't feel hatred, only release. After the presentation, reporters swarmed around me. Questions flew from every direction. How do you feel? What message do you have for those who betrayed you? I smiled faintly. Forgive quickly, but never forget what pain can teach you. When I turned, Unia was still sitting in the front row, frozen. The world she built on lies had just collapsed around her. She finally stood, walked toward me slowly, and whispered, "Robertson, please, let me explain." I met her gaze. Explain? Or justify? Her voice cracked. I didn't mean to steal it all. I thought if I showed them your work, they'd finally respect us. I was desperate. And then, when they offered me money, I couldn't stop. Tears filled her eyes. I lost control. I stared at her for a long moment. The anger I expected never came. Just sadness. "You didn't lose control, Unia," I said quietly. "You traded loyalty for applause." She sobbed, right there in front of everyone. Cameras flashed, capturing her breaking apart. I turned to the crowd and said, "This story isn't about revenge. It's about truth. And truth has a way of humbling all of us." Then I walked off stage as the hall thundered with applause that didn't sound like victory. It sounded like closure. The next morning, my face was everywhere, newspapers, blogs, TV interviews. The man whose truth outshone the lie. Engineer reclaims his dream, wife's betrayal exposed. Mr. Barrett's company officially announced a partnership with me, offering full production rights. Investors call from Europe and Asia. For the first time in my life, I had choices, but none of it filled the emptiness inside. That evening, Unia showed up at my apartment gate. She looked nothing like the woman I'd married. No jewelry, no makeup, no confidence. Just guilt. "Please," she whispered through the gate. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, then nodded. We sat under the small porch light, silent for a long while. Finally, she said, "You don't have to forgive me, but please don't let this define you. I ruined everything." I looked at her, really looked. Beneath all her pride was fear, the same fear that had once driven me. "I already forgave you," I said softly. "Not for you, for me. Because holding anger means letting you live rent-free in my heart." She broke down crying. I didn't reach out to comfort her. Some distances must remain. When she finally left, I whispered to the night, Let this be our last goodbye. Months later, I return home to Bostonville town. This time as a different man. Billboards of true power line the streets. Kids point at my posters, shouting, "That's him." The mayor invited me to light the town's first official solar hybrid power grid. As the switch flipped, bright light washed over the streets that once knew only darkness. In the crowd, I saw a chick wiping his eyes. "You did it, my boy," he said. I smiled. "No, we did." When the ceremony ended, I walked to the same spot where Unia had once mocked me in front of her friends. The benches were still there, but the pain was gone. I looked at the horizon and whispered, "I didn't just build power. I built peace." That night, as I watched the town glow from my hotel window, I realized something deeper. The greatest revenge isn't success. It's freedom. Because when truth finally shines, even the darkest betrayal becomes a memory, and the heart a home again. A few weeks after the town lighting ceremony, I received an unexpected message. It was from Unia. She had been volunteering at a women's shelter in the city, helping young mothers start small tailoring businesses. Her message was short. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I'm learning how to earn peace. If you ever open your training center, I'd like to help." I stared at the message for a long time. My first instinct was to delete it, to move on completely. But then I remembered how far I had come, and how forgiveness wasn't weakness. It was growth. So I replied, "If you truly want to help others, not yourself, then come." When she arrived weeks later, she was a shadow of the proud woman I'd once known, but softer somehow, lighter. The staff welcomed her without judgment, though whispers filled the air. I gave her a simple role, managing supplies, helping students with their projects. She worked quietly, avoiding the spotlight. One evening, I found her teaching a young apprentice how to stitch a torn overall. She looked up, surprised. "I'm just trying to do something useful," she said gently. For the first time in a long while, I smiled at her, not with pain, but with peace. News about True Power Academy began spreading fast. Journalists from across the country visited to cover our work. They filmed our students. Former street boys now designing energy solutions from scrap metal. The story went viral online. Mechanic turns betrayal into hope, builds academy for forgotten youth. Then one day, a journalist asked, "Can we feature your wife? Her part in your story is powerful." I hesitated. "She's not my wife anymore," I said quietly, "but she's part of the truth." When the video was released, people were stunned. It showed not just my invention, but also Unia's redemption, her admission of guilt, her work with the students, her message about pride and forgiveness. The public reaction was overwhelming. Instead of hate, many viewers wrote, "This is what real healing looks like. We all need to learn from them." Unia approached me after the documentary aired. "You didn't have to include me," she said softly. "Yes, I did," I replied, "because your mistake was part of what made me grow." She wiped her tears, whispering, "Maybe this is what grace feels like." That night, I realized redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about rewriting its ending. Months later, True Power was invited to the National Innovation Expo in Abuja, a stage far grander than I'd ever imagined. We were to showcase our clean energy models to foreign investors. As I stood on that massive stage before dignitaries and journalists, I thought back to my old shed, the one where it all began. The oil stains, the torn sketches, the smell of solder and hope. When I began my speech, my voice shook with emotion. I stand here not as a genius, but as a man who once fixed broken things. Cars, machines, dreams. Today, I fix them in a different way. The crowd applauded. Then I added, "This project began with pain, but pain can be the spark that lights a brighter path." I paused, then turned to the side of the stage. There's someone here who taught me that even betrayal can lead to purpose. The hall went silent as Unia stepped forward, modestly dressed, standing beside me. I handed her the microphone. She whispered, "I once mocked my husband's struggle, but now I see greatness doesn't always shine. Sometimes it hums quietly in a small workshop." The hall erupted in applause. At that moment, It didn't feel like revenge or even justice. It felt like renewal. After the expo, things changed rapidly. International investors backed our designs. Universities invited me to speak. And yet, the greatest joy didn't come from the fame. It came from watching lives transform at the academy. Boys who once roamed the streets now designed solar lamps for rural schools. Girls who had never held a wrench now built microgenerators from discarded parts. One day, during graduation at the academy, I looked out over the crowd of proud families. Unia stood among the staff, clapping for the students. When the ceremony ended, she came up to me and said quietly, "You've changed so many lives, Robertson. You changed mine too." I looked at her and said, "You helped me understand that love without patience becomes pride, and pride without humility becomes loss." She smiled faintly. I'll never forget that. We stood in silence for a while. Two people who had once shared love, pain, and rebirth, now standing as proof that forgiveness doesn't always restore what was broken, but it can still create something beautiful. A year later, I walked through the new True Power Global Center, a sprawling building filled with students from across Africa. On the walls were words that had become our motto: build quietly, let your work speak. Cameras flashed as we unveiled a new project, a free solar initiative for orphanages. After the ceremony, a reporter asked me, "What message do you have for people who've been mocked, doubted, or betrayed?" I smiled. Don't waste your time proving people wrong. Spend it building something that proves you right to yourself. Later that night, as I stood on a rooftop overlooking the glowing city, I thought of the journey, from the small, oil-stained shed to this sea of light. And deep in my heart, I whispered, I wasn't building to be seen. I was building so that light would never go out again, not in my home, not in my heart. As the wind brushed my face, I realized a truth that would stay with me forever. True worth isn't measured by what the world applauds, but by what you create in silence. When no one believes but you,